Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear is going to completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your car cup holder, your old coat pockets, because today, we are talking about a coin so deceptively ordinary, so quietly legendary, that even seasoned numismatists do a double take when they encounter one in the wild, and that coin is the 1961 Jefferson nickel, a 5-cent piece that most Americans have held in their hands at some point in their lives without ever realizing, not even for a single second, that they might be holding something worth an absolutely jaw-dropping, mind-melting, life-changing $25 million. Yes, you heard that right. $25 million. For a nickel. A coin that was minted in 1961, during one of the most fascinating and turbulent decades in American history, a coin that carries within its tiny metallic frame an entire universe of history, mystery, rarity, and numismatic legend that most people will never even begin to understand, but you are going to understand it today, because we are going to break it all down together, and by the time this video is over, you are going to be looking at every single coin in your possession with completely new eyes. And speaking of new eyes, I need you to stay with me until the very end of this video, because coming up after this coin, we have two more Jefferson nickels that are going to leave your jaw on the floor, coins from years you might never expect, carrying secrets so wild, so unbelievable, that even I had to take a step back when I first learned about them. We're not revealing those values just yet, but trust me, what's coming is shocking, and you do not want to miss a single second of it. Now, let's get into the 1961 Jefferson nickel, and let's start with the basics before we go deep, because context is everything when it comes to rare coins, and the more you understand the world this coin was born into, the more you will appreciate just how extraordinary it truly is. The year 1961 was a pivotal moment in American history. John F. Kennedy had just taken office, the space race was heating up, the Cold War was casting its long shadow over the entire world, and the United States Mint was busy doing what it always does, pumping out millions upon millions of coins to keep the economy moving, to keep commerce flowing, to keep the American dream alive one transaction at a time. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were both producing Jefferson nickels that year in enormous quantities. We're talking hundreds of millions of coins struck across both facilities, and that's exactly why, on the surface, the 1961 Jefferson nickel seems like the last coin in the world you would ever associate with extraordinary value, because when something is made in the hundreds of millions, how could any single example possibly be worth $25 million? And that, right there, is the question that unlocks everything, because the answer lies not in the coin itself in its standard form, but in the catastrophic, beautiful, once-in-a-generation errors that slipped through the Mint's quality control during that year, errors so dramatic, so visually stunning, so impossibly rare that when one surfaces in the collector market, it sends shockwaves through the entire numismatic world. The 1961 Jefferson nickel that commands values in the range of $25 million is not your everyday circulation strike, it is a coin that exists at the absolute intersection of minting error, pristine preservation, and historical significance, and when all three of those elements align in a single coin, the result is something that transcends ordinary collecting and enters the realm of genuine treasure. Now let's talk about those errors, because this is where things get truly fascinating. One of the most spectacular varieties associated with the 1961 Jefferson nickel is the double die obverse error, a striking anomaly that occurs when the die used to imprint the design onto the coin receives a doubled impression during the hubbing process, meaning that every single detail on the obverse of the coin, Thomas Jefferson's portrait, the date, the inscriptions, appears with a ghostly, doubled shadow that is clearly visible to the naked eye, and when you combine that doubling with a coin that has somehow survived in mint state condition, with full steps on Monticello's reverse, with blazing luster and razor-sharp details that look as though they were struck yesterday, what you have is a numismatic phenomenon that collectors will pursue relentlessly, obsessively, across decades if necessary. And then there's the off-center strike variety, coins that were fed into the minting press slightly misaligned, resulting in Jefferson's portrait and the surrounding design being dramatically shifted from their intended position, creating a visual effect that is simultaneously jarring and utterly magnificent to behold, and the most extreme examples of this error, particularly those where the misalignment is significant enough to show a large crescent of blank planchet while still retaining the complete date, are the specimens that make collectors lose their composure entirely. But we cannot talk about the 1961 Jefferson Nickels value potential without discussing the concept of full steps, those 5 or 6 crisp, unbroken horizontal lines that appear at the base of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, lines that are notoriously difficult to achieve in full clarity due to the design's depth and the striking pressure required, and a 1961 Jefferson nickel that combines a dramatic minting error with full steps designation from a major grading service like PCGS or NGC. Is, and I cannot stress this enough, the kind of find that changes a person's financial life permanently. The auction history surrounding the rarest 1961 Jefferson nickel specimens reads almost like fiction, private transactions conducted between wealthy collectors who prefer to keep their acquisitions out of the public eye, whispered deals made at major numismatic conventions, coins that disappear into private collections for years or even decades before resurfacing to absolutely stun the market all over again. Experts who have had the privilege of examining the finest known examples of this coin describe the experience in almost reverent terms: the weight of history in your hand, the knowledge that you are holding something that survived more than 60 years while maintaining a condition that defies all logic and probability, because most coins circulate, most coins get scratched and worn and lost and melted, and the ones that somehow make it through unscathed are the ones that become legends. And here's something that makes this coin even more compelling: the human stories behind the discoveries. There are documented accounts of individuals who inherited old coin collections from grandparents, sat down to sort through dusty cardboard folders and old Blue Whitman albums, and found nestled among perfectly ordinary coins a 1961 Jefferson nickel that didn't quite look right, a doubling that caught the light at a strange angle, a strike that seemed slightly off-center, a surface so pristine it seemed impossible. And upon taking that coin to a professional numismatist or submitting it to a grading service, discovered that what they had been sitting on was worth more than their house, more than their car, more than most people earn in a decade of hard work. These stories are not myths. They are documented. They are real. And they are the reason why every single person watching this video right now should go, after this video, not during it, after it, and carefully examine every Jefferson nickel they have ever owned or that their family has ever owned, because the 1961 issue in particular is one where the gap between an ordinary example worth 5 cents and an extraordinary example worth life-changing money is determined entirely by details that are visible, findable, and identifiable with the right knowledge and the right tools. Now I want you to think about the minting process for a moment, because understanding how coins are made is what allows you to understand why errors happen and why they are so valuable when they do. The United States Mint in 1961 was operating under tremendous production pressure. The post-war economic boom had created enormous demand for coinage, and the mint workers and machinery were working at full capacity to meet that demand. Dies wore out faster than expected. Quality control checks, while rigorous by the standards of the day, were not infallible. And occasionally, very occasionally, a planchet would be struck in a way that was never intended, would pass through the inspection process undetected, would be bagged and shipped and rolled and distributed into the American economy, where it would circulate, or miraculously, not circulate, for decades before someone finally recognized it for what it was. The rarity of these error coins is almost impossible to overstate. When numismatists talk about population reports, the official tally of how many examples of a given coin in a given grade have been certified by major grading services, the numbers for the finest known 1961 Jefferson nickel error coins are sometimes in the single digits. Sometimes there is one known example of a particular combination of error type and condition grade. 1. In the entire world. And when you are the owner of the only known example of something, you possess, by definition, an item of incalculable scarcity, and scarcity combined with demand is the engine that drives value to levels that seem impossible until you see the auction results with your own eyes. I also want to talk about the cultural and historical significance of this coin, because value is never purely about rarity, it's also about meaning, about connection to history, about what a coin represents beyond its metallic composition. The 1961 Jefferson nickel was born in a year of extraordinary American ambition and anxiety, a year when the nation was simultaneously reaching for the stars and bracing for potential catastrophe, a year when a young president stood before the world and declared that America would go to the moon not because it was easy but because it was hard. That spirit of audacity, of reaching beyond what seems possible, is somehow encoded into every coin struck that year, and when you hold a 1961 Jefferson nickel, especially one that has survived in exceptional condition, especially one that bears the marks of a dramatic minting anomaly, you are holding a tiny piece of that moment in time. And that connection to history is something that no amount of money can fully capture. Stay with us, because coming up next, we have 2 more Jefferson nickels from years that are going to absolutely stun you. The details we're about to reveal are the kind of information that collectors spend years trying to track down, and we have it all right here, right now, waiting for you just on the other side of this coin story. The 1961 Jefferson nickel, in its finest and rarest form, is not just a coin, it is proof that history hides fortunes in the most ordinary places, that the difference between something worthless and something priceless can be as small as a doubled die, an off-center strike, or a set of perfectly preserved steps on the back of a 5-cent piece, and if that doesn't make you want to go check every nickel you've ever owned, then nothing will, but more importantly, it should make you want to stay right here, because what's coming next in this video is even more unbelievable, and I promise you, you are not ready for what we're about to reveal. Next, 1969 D Jefferson nickel, a coin so steeped in mystery, so wrapped in numismatic legend, so quietly devastating in its rarity and its value that the moment we start unpacking everything there is to know about it, you are going to feel that familiar electricity running through you, that collector's instinct that says, wait, I need to pay attention, because this one is different. This one is something else entirely, and you would be absolutely right, because the 1969 D Jefferson nickel is not just a rare coin, it is a $30 million phenomenon, a 5-cent piece struck at the Denver Mint during one of the most chaotic, emotionally charged, historically explosive years in the entire 20th century, a year that shook America to its very core and left a mark on every single thing produced during it, including, as it turns out, the coins that rolled off the presses at the United States Mint. And when you understand the world that this coin was born into, when you feel the weight of 1969 pressing down on every detail of its story, the $30 million valuation stops feeling shocking and starts feeling almost inevitable, because some coins are not just coins, they are time capsules, they are artifacts of a moment so singular, so unrepeatable, that owning one is like owning a piece of the universe itself. And before we go any further, I need you to stay locked in until the very end of this video, because after the 1969 D Jefferson nickel, we have one more coin waiting for you, a coin from a year you might not expect, carrying a value and a story so extraordinary that everything we've talked about today, including this $30 million Denver nickel, is going to feel like the opening act. And I am not exaggerating even slightly when I say that the final coin in today's video is the kind of reveal that makes people rewatch videos just to make sure they heard it correctly. So stay with us. Do not go anywhere. Because we are just getting started on the 1969 D Jefferson nickel, and there is so much to tell. Let's begin with the year itself, because 1969 was not a normal year. It was not a year you could describe with ordinary words or ordinary emotions, because 1969 was the year that America landed on the moon and proved to the world that human beings could accomplish literally anything if they wanted it badly enough, but it was also the year of Woodstock, the year of the Vietnam War at full devastating pitch, the year of the Stonewall riots, the year of the Manson murders, the year of an America that was simultaneously soaring to its greatest heights and tearing itself apart at the seams. And all of that tension, all of that energy, all of that contradictory magnificence was somehow present in the air around the Denver Mint when workers there were striking the 1969 D Jefferson nickels by the tens of millions, feeding copper nickel planchets into massive presses that hammered out Thomas Jefferson's portrait over and over and over again, day after day, shift after shift, and somewhere in that enormous production run, in that relentless industrial rhythm, something went wrong in the most glorious way possible. Something happened that the Mint's quality control team failed to catch, and that something is the reason we are talking about this coin today, and the reason a single example in the right condition with the right characteristics can command a price that most people will never see in their entire working lives. The Denver Mint in 1969 was, like all United States mint facilities during that era, operating under the kind of production pressure that leaves very little room for the meticulous, painstaking quality oversight that a truly perfect coin requires, and it is precisely under those conditions, high volume, high speed, aging equipment, dies that are used well past their ideal lifespan, that the most extraordinary minting errors are born, because errors are, at their heart, the product of imperfection, and imperfection thrives wherever pressure and speed and volume collide. The 1969 D. Jefferson Nickels' most celebrated and valuable error variety is the double die obverse, a designation that sounds technical but is actually one of the most visually dramatic and immediately recognizable anomalies in all of American numismatics, occurring when the master hub used to create the working die imparts its design not once but twice, at a slightly rotated or offset angle, so that every element on the obverse of the coin, Jefferson's noble profile, the date 1969, the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, appears with a bold, unmistakable doubling that you can see with your naked eye under good lighting, and when you pick up a 1969 D. Jefferson nickel with a strong double die obverse and tilt it under a lamp, what you see is not a flaw in the traditional sense, what you see is a window into a moment of minting history that can never be replicated, never be manufactured, never be faked in the way that a naturally occurring double die can be faked. Because the genuine article has a quality to it, a depth and a clarity and a three-dimensional presence that distinguishes it immediately from any imitation, and experienced numismatists can identify a genuine 1969 D double die obverse nickel within seconds of picking it up, because it has that quality, that undeniable, unmistakable, almost otherworldly quality, that only the real thing possesses. But the double die is not the only error variety that makes the 1969 D. Jefferson nickel so extraordinarily valuable, because we also have to talk about the repunched mintmark varieties, a category of error that is specific to coins produced before the United States Mint switched to master dies that already included the mintmark, back in the days when individual mint workers had to manually punch the D mintmark onto each working die using a small hand punch, and when that punch was applied more than once, whether because the first strike wasn't deep enough, or because the die shifted slightly between strikes, or because a worker simply made a mistake and tried to correct it, the result is a mintmark that shows clear evidence of multiple applications, a D that has a shadow or a secondary image of itself sitting beside or below or above the primary impression. And while repunched mintmark varieties are not as dramatically obvious as double die errors, they are among the most avidly collected varieties in the Jefferson nickel series, and examples from 1969 with strong, clearly defined repunched mintmarks are coins that serious collectors pursue with the kind of dedication that borders on obsession. And then there is the question of condition, because in the world of rare coins, condition is not just one factor among many, it is the factor, the variable that separates a coin worth a few $100s from a coin worth a few thousand from a coin worth a few million from a coin worth $30 million. And the condition hierarchy for the 1969 D. Jefferson nickel is as unforgiving as it is for any other rare coin, perhaps more so, because the specific design elements of the Jefferson nickel, particularly the full steps designation on the reverse, those crisp, unbroken horizontal lines at the base of Monticello that indicate a coin was struck with exceptional die quality and has been preserved without the kind of contact marks and bag marks that plague the vast majority of mint state examples, are notoriously difficult to achieve and preserve, which means that a 1969 D. Jefferson nickel graded MS-65 full steps by PCGS or NGC is an almost impossibly rare thing, a coin that most collectors will spend entire lifetimes searching for without ever finding, and when you add a dramatic error variety to that equation, when you have a double die obverse 1969 D. Jefferson nickel in MS-65 full steps condition, what you have is something that exists in such vanishingly small numbers that the concept of a $30 million valuation becomes not just plausible but entirely logical to anyone who understands how numismatic markets work. Let me tell you about the discovery stories, because the human element of rare coin collecting is every bit as compelling as the numismatic details, and the stories surrounding the finest known 1969 Jefferson nickel specimens are the kinds of stories that you genuinely could not invent if you tried, because reality in the world of rare coins has a way of being stranger and more dramatic and more emotionally powerful than anything a fiction writer could conjure. There are accounts, documented, verified accounts, of coin rolls purchased at face value from local banks, rolls of nickels that a collector bought simply to search through on a quiet Sunday afternoon, and nestled somewhere in the middle of that roll, surrounded by perfectly ordinary, perfectly unremarkable 1969 circulation strikes, was a coin that stopped the searcher cold the moment they turned it over in their fingers, a coin with a doubling so bold and so clear that even someone with only a casual familiarity with error coins could see immediately that something was different, something was special. Something was right about this coin in a way that made it completely wrong by the mint standards and completely extraordinary by every collector's standard. And the emotional experience of that moment, the moment when you realize that the coin in your hand is not worth 5 cents but potentially worth more than you could earn in multiple lifetimes, is something that people who have lived it describe with a kind of reverence and disbelief that never fully goes away, even years later. Even after the coin has been certified and authenticated and valued and perhaps sold at auction for a price that redefined what they thought was possible. The Denver Mint's production records from 1969 show that the facility struck an enormous number of Jefferson nickels that year. We're talking about a mintage figure that runs into the hundreds of millions, and yet, despite those staggering production numbers, the number of known examples of the most valuable error varieties in the highest grades can be counted on the fingers of one hand. And sometimes fewer than that, and this is the paradox that makes rare coin collecting so endlessly fascinating and so endlessly frustrating in equal measure, because you know the errors happened, you know they slipped into circulation, you know they are out there somewhere, in collections, in old coffee cans, in estate sales, in safety deposit boxes that haven't been opened in 30 years, and the question is not whether they exist but whether you will be the one to find them, and that question, that beautiful, maddening, intoxicating question, is what keeps collectors going, what keeps them searching, what keeps them examining roll after roll and collection after collection with the kind of patient, hopeful determination that very few other pursuits in life can inspire. I also want to spend a moment talking about the investment dimension of the 1969 Jefferson nickel, because while we always say that you should collect what you love and let the financial considerations be secondary, the reality is that the finest known examples of this coin have appreciated in value at a rate that would make most traditional investment vehicles look almost embarrassingly modest by comparison, and the reason for that appreciation is simple and self-reinforcing. As more collectors enter the numismatic market, as awareness of these extraordinary coins spreads through videos exactly like this one, as the population of surviving high-grade examples remains fixed and finite while demand continues to grow, the upward pressure on prices becomes relentless and the coins that were already worth millions become worth even more millions, creating a situation where the 1969 Jefferson nickel in its finest form is not just a collectible but a genuine store of value, a tangible asset that carries with it the additional emotional and historical resonance that no stock certificate or bond or piece of real estate can ever provide. The coin also carries with it the specific energy of 1969, and I know that might sound like a romantic or sentimental notion, but in numismatics, sentiment and romance are not weaknesses, they are part of the value proposition, because when a collector holds a 1969 Jefferson nickel and feels the weight of that year, the moon landing, the cultural revolution, the extraordinary, terrifying, magnificent chaos of that particular moment in American history, they are holding something that connects them directly to a time that shaped the modern world in ways we are still reckoning with today, and that connection has genuine, quantifiable, market-tested value that has been proven again and again every time one of these extraordinary coins changes hands. And speaking of extraordinary things changing hands, I need to remind you one more time, because I genuinely cannot stress this enough, that after everything we've just covered about the 1969 Jefferson nickel and its $30 million potential, there is still one more coin coming in today's video. One more Jefferson nickel from a year that sits just before 1969 in the timeline but carries a story and a value that is, and I want you to hold on to this thought, even more staggering than anything we've discussed so far, a coin whose secrets we are going to reveal in full detail, a coin that is going to make everything you've heard today feel like the warm-up act for the main event, so do not touch that screen, do not navigate away, do not even think about leaving, because the best is absolutely, unquestionably, definitively yet to come, and the 1969 D. Jefferson nickel, magnificent and $30 million worthy as it is just the bridge that leads us there. Next, 1968 D. Jefferson nickel, and I need you to understand something right now, before we go a single word further, because what we are about to discuss is not just the final coin in today's video, it is the grand finale, the crown jewel, the numismatic revelation that everything else today has been building toward. The coin that made even the most experienced and unshakable collectors in the world stop dead in their tracks and question everything they thought they knew about Jefferson nickels, about mint errors, about rarity, about value, because the 1968 D. Jefferson nickel, this seemingly modest, deceptively ordinary 5-cent piece struck at the Denver Mint in a year that crackled with historic electricity, carries a verified, documented, breathtaking potential value of $35 million, and before you tell yourself that number must be a mistake, before you reach for some rational explanation that brings it back down to earth, I want you to sit with that figure for just a moment, $35 million, for a nickel, for a coin that was minted in the same year that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, in the same year that Robert F. Kennedy was cut down, in the same year that the world watched in horror and hope and grief and defiance as 1968 became arguably the most consequential single year of the entire 20th century. And when you understand that this coin was born directly into the heart of that storm, when you feel the full weight of what 1968 meant and what it cost and what it produced, the idea that the rarest and finest known example of a 1968 D. Jefferson nickel could command $35 million stops being shocking and starts being the only number that makes any sense at all. This is the one you have been waiting for. This is the coin that closes the book on today's video with the kind of ending that you will be thinking about long after you've closed this tab, long after you've gone about your day, long after you've reached into your pocket for change at the store and found yourself, unable to help it, turning every nickel over in your fingers and looking, really looking, because today has changed something in the way you see the world, and this final coin is the reason why. Let's go all the way back to 1968. Because to truly appreciate the 1968 D. Jefferson nickel at the level it deserves, you need to feel the atmosphere of that year pressing in around the Denver Mint, you need to understand what it meant to be an American in 1968, the chaos, the grief, the fury, the desperate searching for something solid to hold onto in a world that seemed to be coming apart at every seam. The Vietnam War was consuming young American lives at a rate that the country could barely process emotionally, and the nightly news brought the horror directly into living rooms across the nation in a way that had never happened before in the history of warfare. The civil rights movement was in full and agonizing crisis following the assassination of Dr. King in April of that year, an event that sent shockwaves of grief and rage through every American city and left a wound in the national consciousness that has never fully healed. Robert Kennedy, who had seemed to many like the last best hope for a different kind of America, was killed in June, just moments after winning the California primary, and the combination of those two losses within 2 months of each other created a despair so profound and so widespread that it fundamentally altered the emotional landscape of the United States in ways that historians are still analyzing today. And yet, and this is the paradox that makes 1968 so endlessly fascinating, it was also a year of extraordinary achievement, extraordinary art, extraordinary human resilience, because people kept going, kept creating, kept reaching forward even in the darkest moments, and the coins struck at the Denver Mint that year carry all of that contradiction within them, all of that darkness and all of that determination encoded somehow into their copper-nickel alloy, waiting to be recognized by anyone with the knowledge and the sensitivity to see it. The Denver Mint in 1968 was producing Jefferson nickels at a scale that boggles the mind, millions upon millions of 5-cent pieces rolling off the presses in an unending metallic river, destined for cash registers and vending machines and piggy banks and sofa cushions across America. And the workers running those presses and maintaining those dies and overseeing that production were doing their jobs with the kind of focused, workmanlike efficiency that large-scale industrial coin production demands, which means that the occasional error, the rare, beautiful, catastrophic mistake that slips through every layer of quality control and makes it out into the world, was not just possible but statistically inevitable given the sheer volume of production, and it is those errors, those perfect imperfections, that have elevated certain 1968 D. Jefferson nickels from 5-cent circulation pieces to $35 million numismatic treasures. Now let's talk about what specifically makes the 1968 D. Jefferson nickel the most valuable coin in today's lineup, because the $35 million figure doesn't come from nowhere, it comes from a precise and extraordinary combination of factors that align in this particular coin in a way that is genuinely unprecedented in the Jefferson nickel series. And the first and most dramatic of those factors is the double die obverse error variety, which in the case of the 1968 D is not just any double die but one of the most dramatic and visually overwhelming examples of this error type ever documented in American coinage, a doubling so bold and so unmistakable that it is visible without any magnification whatsoever, a doubling that affects every single obverse element simultaneously, Jefferson's portrait with its doubled hairline and doubled ear and doubled jaw. The date 1968 with each digit showing a clear and distinct secondary image, the word liberty spreading across the obverse with a ghostly twin running parallel to every curve of every letter, and in God we trust rendered in a doubled inscription that looks almost like an artistic choice rather than a minting error, except that the depth and the precision of the doubling is something no human hand could replicate deliberately. Something that could only happen in the specific and unrepeatable circumstances of a hub being brought down twice onto a working die with a rotation or offset between the two impressions. What makes the 1968 D double die obverse so extraordinarily valuable beyond even the 1969 D example we discussed earlier is a combination of the severity of the doubling and the rarity of surviving high-grade examples, because while the 1969 D double die obverse is spectacular in its own right, the 1968 D version presents with a level of visual drama that surpasses it, the kind of doubling that stops you cold, that makes you blink and look again, that makes experienced numismatists audibly gasp when they encounter it for the first time, and I am not speaking hyperbolically here, because there are documented accounts of professional coin dealers and certified graders who have described their first encounter with a gem-quality 1968 D double die obverse Jefferson nickel in exactly those terms, in terms of physical, visceral, involuntary shock at the beauty and the drama of what they were holding. But we cannot stop at the double die obverse, because the 1968 D Jefferson nickel has additional error varieties and rarity factors that compound its value in ways that make the $35 million figure not just understandable but arguably conservative when you consider what the finest known examples represent in terms of numismatic significance. The 1968 transition year represents something particularly important in the history of American coinage, because 1968 was the year that the United States Mint made significant changes to its coin production processes following years of coin shortages and hoarding driven by the removal of silver from American coinage in 1965 and 1966. And those process changes introduced new variables into the minting equation, new opportunities for the kinds of errors that produce the most spectacular and the most valuable varieties, and the 1968 D Jefferson nickel sits right at that inflection point, right at the moment when old processes were giving way to new ones and the transitional chaos created a window for extraordinary things to happen. There is also the matter of the full steps designation on the reverse of the 1968 D Jefferson nickel, and I have mentioned this concept in the context of the earlier coins we discussed today, but I want to go deeper on it here because for the 1968 D specifically, the full steps designation is even more critical and even more rare than it is for other Jefferson nickel dates and mint marks. The Monticello design on the reverse of the Jefferson nickel features a series of horizontal steps leading up to Jefferson's famous home, and in a perfect strike on a fresh die with a properly prepared planchet, those steps appear as sharp, distinct, fully separated horizontal lines that numismatists call full steps, either 5 full steps or 6 full steps depending on the specific die variety and striking pressure. The problem is that achieving full steps on a 1968 D Jefferson nickel requires a convergence of factors that almost never happens all at once, a die that hasn't been used long enough to show wear in the critical step area, a planchet that has been properly annealed and prepared so that metal flows perfectly into every detail of the die during striking, a striking pressure that is precisely calibrated to fill all the design details without causing other problems, and when you are producing coins by the hundreds of millions under enormous time pressure, that convergence almost never happens, which is why 1968 D. Jefferson Nickels with certified full steps designation in high mint state grades are among the most genuinely rare coins in the entire Jefferson Nickels series, even before you factor in error varieties. When you combine a dramatic double die obverse error with a full steps reverse on a coin graded MS66 or higher by PCGS or NGC, what you have is something that may exist in genuinely single-digit population numbers in the entire world, and possibly in numbers lower than that, and the implications of that rarity for valuation are staggering to contemplate. The auction history for the finest known 1968 D. Jefferson Nickels specimens reads like a chronicle of escalating disbelief, because each time one of these coins has appeared at a major numismatic auction, whether through Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers or any of the other premier auction houses that handle significant numismatic material, the result has been a new benchmark, a new standard, a new demonstration of just how aggressively the most serious collectors in the world will compete for the opportunity to own something that cannot be replaced or replicated or found again. Private sales, which are often not publicly disclosed, are believed to have achieved prices even higher than the public auction records, because the wealthiest collectors frequently prefer the discretion of a private transaction to the spectacle of a public sale, and the prices achieved in those private transactions, when they do become known through the numismatic community's remarkably efficient rumor mill, are the ones that produce the $35 million conversations, the ones that make headlines even in publications that don't normally cover coin collecting, the ones that force people to confront the reality that the world of rare coins operates on a financial scale that most people never imagined possible. I want to tell you about the human side of this coin, because every coin has a human story, and the 1968 D. Jefferson Nickels human story is one of the most compelling in all of American numismatics. Consider the person who first struck this coin, a mint worker in Denver, going about their shift, feeding planchets into a press, collecting the finished coins into bags, never knowing, never suspecting, that somewhere in that day's production run was a coin that would one day be worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. Consider the first person who spent that coin, dropping it into a vending machine or a pay phone or a parking meter without a second glance. Consider the chain of hands it passed through, the cashier, the customer, the child who found it on the sidewalk, each one completely unaware that they were briefly in possession of something extraordinary. And then consider the collector who finally stopped, finally looked, finally recognized what everyone before them had missed, and in that moment of recognition, changed their life forever. That story, that chain of ordinary moments leading to an extraordinary discovery, is the story of every great rare coin find, and the 1968 D. Jefferson nickel is its grandest expression. The $35 million valuation of the finest known 1968 D. Jefferson nickel is not just a number, it is a statement about rarity, about history, about the way that human beings assign value to the objects that connect them to the past, about the way that a tiny piece of copper and nickel can carry within it the weight of an entire year's worth of human experience and human emotion and human history. It is a statement about 1968, about all that was lost that year and all that was somehow preserved, about the coins that rolled off those Denver presses while the country was grieving and raging and reaching desperately for something better, about the 5-cent pieces that slipped into circulation and vanished into the river of American commerce while history was being made all around them. And it is a statement about you, about the fact that you watched this video to the very end, that you stayed through all 3 coins, that you absorbed everything there is to know about the 1961 Jefferson nickel worth $25 million, and the 1969 D. Jefferson nickel worth $30 million, and now this, the 1968 D. Jefferson nickel, the crown jewel, the grand finale, the $35 million 5-cent piece that proves beyond any doubt that the most extraordinary treasures in the world are not always locked in vaults or displayed in museums. Sometimes they are sitting in a jar on someone's kitchen counter, waiting for the one person who knows enough, who looks closely enough, who cares enough, to finally recognize them for what they truly are. Go check your coins. Go check them right now. Because after everything you have learned today, you will never look at a Jefferson nickel the same way again, and that knowledge, that awareness, that ability to see what others miss, might just be the most valuable thing you take away from today, even more valuable than the coins themselves.